Thank you. And I want to certainly fast forward so that we can have some engagement with the audience. What a powerful, phenomenal panel. Voices that we have already heard. As I listened, I kept changing how I wanted to come with and to you. And you said something about calling it up and calling it out. I want to suggest that we need to call it in. And the in is the sacred memory of what we must go back to, that concept of Amani, on the way back to the divine. What we must go back to in order to make the right decision at the crossroads. And what I want to submit is that we are at a crossroads. And Evanston in particular has a special role to play at the crossroads. So if you will just allow me to share my journey over the last 3 weeks in an effort to decide how I could uniquely speak in this forum. 3 weeks ago, I was speaking at the United Nations in Geneva before the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. It represents the affirmation and the proofing up over decades that slavery was a crime against humanity. And for that, there has to be a reckoning and a process of reparations and reparatory justice at the end of the day. And that the consequences, like the causes, were global and are global. And so one of the things that I want to share with you is the journey of connecting the dots. What I can say that I am uniquely positioned to be, to feel, to represent here is what it means to be mother. The woman in me allows me to share with you the lamentation and the holy rage of this moment in the world. And so my question is, what do you do with that holy rage? What must we do with that holy rage? So one of the things I did was I got here about 15 minutes earlier just so I could go and drive by my family home. I grew up in Evanston at the tail end of the Jim Crow Northern style, separate but equal. I witnessed as a student at Northwestern, Evanston get on the global map, the US map, as having been the epicenter of a vision for a better world through, quote, integrated education. And I saw the failure of that. The failure of that because it was construed from the beginning to be a project only for people of African descent. At the crossroads, we failed. And what I want to suggest is that perhaps in a moment when Evanston has a second chance, because all over the world, Evanston is known as the first municipality to dare to have the courage to declare reparations for people of African descent, perhaps we won't make that same mistake again. But we will make that same mistake if we don't accept the call to solidarity. And we have to understand that we are a remnant here that can be an epicenter for a global ripple effect to embrace the call of what Martin Luther King called a revolution of values. And what does that revolution of values mean? It means we must give up the privilege of thinking of ourselves as a chosen people or as exceptional. We must give up the notion that it's okay to create a hierarchy of human value that 40 years ago said for every one Israeli life, we're going to take 3. When you look at the data now, it's for every one Israeli life, we're going to take more than 30,000. Look at our hands and see the blood on them. In the name of this country, in the name of our tax dollars, and in the name of our identity. And dare we have the courage to say and to do, not under our watch. So it's not enough to say, what does justice look like? I think the question the panel has begun for us to think about is, what does solidarity look like? My first trip to the Middle East, quote, one of the myths, it's not the Middle East, it's Northeast Africa. We need to understand what's going on right now in Africa is connected to what's going on in Palestine. We need to understand that it was not just the ambassador a few weeks ago who represented the United States casting a veto vote. But remember, call into the sacred memory and understand that Andy Young was fired as ambassador for a conversation he had with the Palestinians. Let us remember that it was the young people in Gaza who told the young people in Ferguson as we were walking with them, this is how you protect yourself from the tear gas. Because the same Israel who trained police in the United States is the same Israel who was the front door to Africa and the upholding of the apartheid system in South Africa. We have got to connect the historical dots and make sense out of this moment as a moment that if we fail, we are going to fail at a time where there is no turning back. And I say that because the civil rights movement is a clear model for the campus encampments, as they should be, but they are not sufficient. And what I want us to consider is the changing landscape. And I submit to you that that changing landscape includes a reality of simulacra and fake news in which the real is now fake and the fake is real. And we do not have the discerning power to figure out the difference. I want to submit to you that the reality is we now have a genomics and genetic platform around which new technologies are allowing for the weaponization in ways that we cannot even imagine. The question is, in whose hands will that technology be? AIPAC has said they have experimented with weather control as a possibility for weaponizing what happens in the Middle East. So I get asked very often by people of African descent, so what matters of Palestine should that have for me? We got our own stuff to deal with. That answer has to be, if we do not begin to focus on the solidarity of the movement, we will be all gobbled up by a divide and conquer strategy. A divide and conquer strategy in which more billionaires were made during the pandemic, and those with wealth continue to create the kind of wealth that allows them now to supersede nation states. So it's time for us to raise a different set of questions, to envision a different world, but it can't be at the level of mere conversation and theologizing. I am proud to say that in my Presbyterian family, that McCormick Theological Seminary has established the first Center for Reparatory Justice Transformation and Remediation in the country. And they've asked me to serve as its founding executive director. That has power for making theology a lived experience. But if we don't connect the dots, and as our dear brother Mitri has said, and understand that this panel in itself is an act of resistance, if we don't figure out how to continue this conversation after today, if we don't embrace the vision of Bright Stars of Bethlehem after today, then this has just been a wonderful Sunday afternoon. But the real work is ahead. And so what I would hope that each of us are able to ask ourselves, why are we really here? And what are we really willing to do to demonstrate solidarity? I don't care how you cut it. If 50+% of this nation can go to bed and wake up in the morning and justify support for the kind of political dehumanizing statements and agenda that is coming out of the mouths of a former president, and not have conflict with that, that's problematic. It is problematic at the level that a democracy is not only at stake, but our very basic humanity is at stake. So one of my mentors and ancestors, Margaret Burroughs, is speaking to me now because she wrote that classical poem, "What Shall I Tell My Children Who Are Black?" And I want to leave us with that question. What shall we tell our children who are American about what we did as we witnessed what we have witnessed that is going on right now in Gaza and in Palestine? The umbilical cord goes from here to there for us. And we cannot unsee what we have seen. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And so I would hope that we can stay hoped up enough that we have the courage to make sure that the agenda that is 900+ pages outlined in a report I commend you to get and begin to read called Project 2025, that you familiarize yourself with understanding what the agenda is. not just for the United States, but for the rest of the world, and that includes each of us. I thank you for this opportunity to share from our heart what we need to be about, because we got to figure out what solidarity looks like and how we're going to participate in the building of it.